Hey guys, you read Ezips here for CSM Practice. Thanks for joining us today. Mergers and acquisitions, when your customers are going through this, is a really tricky situation to handle. Sometimes I get customers calling me and say, hey, we have one of our major customers just letting us know they just went through a merger and acquisition, and all of a sudden they're not speaking to us, or it's really hard to get their attention, or we don't really know what's going on. And I always feel like there's always a better way of handling things. And today I am super excited to get Kristi Faltorusso, VP of Customer Success at ClientSuccess, a customer success software. You should totally check them out. And Kristi is joining us because she has had this happen to her many times before. And today she's going to bring in and share her playbook on what to do when your customers are going through a merger and acquisition. Kristi, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so excited for today's conversation, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate. This is a very hot topic, and I think we're going to have a great discussion.
Before we continue, don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel and smash that notification button so that you don't miss out on any new videos. Especially now, the market is so hot and there's so many mergers and acquisitions that are taking place. What should customer success managers do?
So honestly, we've been navigating this quite a bit, right? We've got a lot of customers who are going through M&A to some extent, right? So whether they're being acquired or they're part of the acquiring company. And we're seeing that how the customer success team navigates and manages that is going to lead to one outcome or another, right? You're either going to be wildly successful and hopefully land in some opportunistic growth and accelerate that partnership, or it's going to lead down this path, probably churn. And so try to work with our customers to navigate that as best as possible, but working fast to address those issues.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because most customer success managers would perceive a merger and acquisition event as a high risk trigger to just say, most likely this customer is going to churn. Can we switch that around to actually look at it as an upsell opportunity?
And I think that mindset shift is really how people should be thinking about it, because I think it will accelerate the velocity in which you run and the strategy you put behind it, right? And I think also positioning it with an opportunistic lens is going to help also draw in other key stakeholders in your business to help you manage that, because also an M&A deal shouldn't be a single threaded kind of owned situation that you're navigating as a CSM individually. So absolutely, it can be wildly successful if you manage it correctly.
For those companies who still experience the loss of a customer due to an M&A, what is the major mistake most of these teams make, and that you have seen even in your experience where companies just fail to react appropriately? What is happening? Why are so many of them turning into a churn or an attrition?
I think that the real thing that I see is there's really this lack of urgency. So I think you want to take the word of the customer, but so many times when you're navigating M&A, the team that you're working with, they don't even know all the details, right? This is at such a high strategic level in the business that they're not getting all the insight there, right? So you're hearing one part of the story. And unfortunately, a lot of CS teams will say, well, no, the customer is really happy. We've had a great partnership and they want to keep us. Well, if the person who wants to keep you is your main point of contact and not the executive or somebody in the acquiring organization, maybe that's not going to land you very well. So I would say lack of sense of urgency and failure to strategize, because M&A can be so complex, and depending on the size of the organizations that are part of this, it could be a very long drawn out process. And without the right folks in your organization managing all those steps effectively, I see a lot of people just fail to manage it. And that's usually what happens.
You've been in this business for a long time. You've done customer success for a very long time. What have you seen as the ultimate playbook when you hear a customer going through either they get acquired or acquiring another company? By the way, is there a different playbook if your customer was getting acquired by a big company versus just acquiring a smaller one?
Yes, you can't treat them the same way, because I will tell you almost 80% of the time, when you lose a customer to M&A, it's probably because they were acquired, not the acquiring company. Usually if the acquiring company is coming in, they've got their own tech stack, and they're usually ones that are going to call the shots on how they want to standardize moving forward. So definitely it's two different paths, and you're definitely hopefully will have more upside when your customer is the one that's acquiring another brand. Hopefully that's an expansion and upsell opportunity for you that lands very nicely in your lap. So I would say you definitely got to think about the two very differently, which actually that dovetails very nicely into my first part of how I would strategize and run a playbook against this, Sarit. So first thing I do, I'm big on research. Unfortunately, not every M&A, depending on the size of the organizations and whether or not they're public or private, will have a lot of information available. So I try to do all of my due diligence. So anything I can go find anywhere on the web, and the web has a ton of information, so just use it well. I do my due diligence and try to do all of that research up front.
Kristi, when you do the research, what kind of questions are you asking yourself? What kind of data are you looking for? If you liked what you've heard so far, that's awesome. More coming in a second here. But in the meantime, I want you to click that like button so that YouTube knows that this is great content and you can start sharing it with others.
I want to know everything about both parties that are involved, right? So if it's a large public company, I'm going to go investigate their 10K. I go listen to their earnings calls, right? I want to go understand as much as I can about who they are and why this company is acquiring the company that I'm working with. It's as much about their financial standings and their business performance and where this fits into their portfolio and their tech stack, right? Why was this an important acquisition for them? Are they planning on keeping the business? And is that typically their model? Are they going to dismantle it and keep the product? All of that research will help you typically understand what you might be able to expect in this situation. Now, every M&A is very different and very unique, but if you see that there's one model that this company typically does, I see a lot of companies, nope, we just want to buy it for the tech. Unfortunately, we're going to get rid of all the people. We're going to keep the product. That information helps you figure out how do you want to approach this with your main team that you're working with on your customer side. And so along with that research, though, I'm also digging into our organization's data. It might be possible that this acquiring company was maybe a prospect of ours at one point. And so I might want to go speak with my sales team to say, hey, did you ever work with them? Obviously didn't move forward with us. What solution did they move forward with? That might help me understand if they're using a competitive solution or what didn't work about our product, right? So what risk might inherently be there if we're faced with certain conversations. So it's information from everywhere. There's no specific only one isolated piece I'm going into. I'm going to LinkedIn. I'm going to go look at all of their executives, who the people are at these companies, who are they connected to, what tech, what did they say, where are they speaking? So the research part of it could actually be very laborious, but I think if it's done well and right, you're going to learn a lot about both businesses, and it'll make you more valuable in having the appropriate conversations with your customer, as well as any opportunities you get to speak with this acquiring company.
I mean, it's one thing to say, do a lot of research. And I think it's another thing to say, why are we doing this research specifically? So you talked about, hey, listen, I'm going to read the 10K, the press releases to really understand what type of merger and acquisition is it. I think that's a really valid point. What are the three main types of mergers and acquisitions that you've seen? And all out of those, which ones are you actually going to proactively pursue as an upsell versus kind of say, well, in this situations, we know 90% of the chance they're not going to renew the contract?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely depends, right? Like, if I see that inherently these companies dismantle the organizations and they're just keeping the product, or they want the revenue component and they're looking to take the customer base and move that into their tech stack, right? There's a lot of reasons. So if they're acquiring it for the company and want to keep it as whole, we have probably a good shot. If they want to keep it for just the product and they're probably going to dismantle the business and the people part of it, probably a little less likely. And if they're only using it for the revenue, right? Like, there's three models, I would say probably one of them fits us to really focus on that from a growth opportunity. And that's if they're going to let this company be its own standalone entity and still continue operations business as usual. If that is the case, then we have a higher likelihood of breaking in to that parent or that acquiring company. If it's the others, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's definitely a long shot.
Well, what I've seen a lot of times is that companies would buy the other company and they would actually prefer to merge the existing team into the fold of the bigger company. And I got to say, even if they just invest in them and they're sort of like acting as an independent extension, most parent companies would like to merge the data. And it's very hard when you have a lot of systems. That is why a lot of times, even if they keep them as independent organization, they would still love for them to use similar systems so that they can integrate and get better insights.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And this is why it's important to understand, if you can get to this level of information, what does their tech stack look like? Because that will help me understand if there is a possibility of us retaining the business and growing it, or if there's going to be a challenge there. I will also say that there's signs of what the plan might be if you have the ability to understand how your customers are using the data in your platform. I've seen M&As go through, and then all of a sudden, if I'm watching user behavior, they're exporting. There's a lot of exporting out of our systems. And that's a great signal to us to say, okay, well, someone's either requesting this data, it's being ingested somewhere else, or they're taking this because they're putting it into another piece of technology, right? It's also great to just pay attention to how your customers are behaving. And I always say behaviors are key because it allows you to intervene appropriately. So when I see that type of thing, it allows me to lean in with better line of questioning.
And then you said you're looking at LinkedIn, you're questioning the sales team. What kind of questions and things are you looking for? I mean, I understand that you're just looking at, which contacts, but what kind of contacts are you looking for? In which department? What kind of links are you looking to have to help you with this potential retention or even upsell opportunity?
I tend to look for similar roles that I'm working with in my current organization. Let's just say, because I'm ClientSuccess, most of my executive sponsors are VPs of customer success or chief customer officer. I'm going to look for similar roles in those organizations. I'm looking to see who those individuals are. Who they're connected to is also really important. I know the customer success platform landscape pretty well. So I know who a lot of those key players are at some of the other vendors. I might see that someone's connected with somebody else and say, oh, okay, well, maybe there's a relationship there that I should be wary of. Or on the flip side, maybe one of my executives has a really great relationship with one of those leaders. It'll allow me to facilitate conversations and leverage that partnership. It's good to know who these people are and then also see what are they up to? How are they thinking? Go read and see, like, they're on podcasts or blogs. I tend to go want to lean into those and read it and kind of hear their philosophy on things, or hear if they're talking about their tech stack. And then also make sure that I'm understanding where there's opportunity for me to leverage other strategic relationships I have to help me break in.
Just to recap, step number one, you do some
Research.
research to understand what is the nature of this M&A and kind of give you a sense on how to tackle this. The second layer is you're trying to figure out the personnel. Who are the stakeholders of the parent company, the current company, what kind of relationship we have as a company. You did your due diligence, you find the right contacts and relationships. What do you do next?
I'm a big advocate of partnering with sales at this point. It's not unlikely that this is going to have a new sales motion because this other acquiring company might not know who you are and what you do. And so you don't want to just treat it as if you're talking to your existing customer who made the decision to bring you in. I'm a big advocate on bringing sales in. Now, if your net new sales only focuses on net new business and can't be bothered, maybe you have an account management team, or there's another resource that can help facilitate this motion, but it does need to be run as a very different play. So it's about partnership there.
It sounds like you're pulling in the sales team because literally your recommendation, if I can translate it, treat this as a new sales process. Get the people who know how to develop these, because it's a new relationship that you're essentially trying to develop with a parent company. Only now you get this nice access because you have an in. And maybe, otherwise selling to this parent company would have been really difficult, but you have an in. If your customer is happy, they can recommend you. They can broker the introduction between yourself, the AE, and the parent company's stakeholders, and off you go.
It is great when your customer can facilitate those introductions and those conversations, but that doesn't always happen, right? So that's a luxury when it can, but I've worked with customers who are navigating this, who don't even know who those people would be, or they don't feel like they're at a high enough level, or the M&A isn't far along yet where they have that. So I'm a big advocate of not waiting. So even in those instances, I will tell my sales team, here's this company, here's what's happening, here's all the information we are allowed to share about our existing customer and partnership. Let's use that information as a way to break in, even if your customer can't. It's great if you can get an intro, whether that is through your customer, through a strategic relationship, whether maybe through your investor, your board of directors, another existing relationship. But if not, arm your sales team with the appropriate information and resources so that they can go in with a warm, maybe not introduction, but a little bit of a leg up there.
Any next steps that the CSM can do at that point?
I mean, at that point, right, it's about, I think, keeping the lines of communication open with your current customer. Hopefully, if they were able to facilitate that introduction, you want to keep them abreast of the progress that you're making, good, bad, or otherwise. And that communication should flow to your customer, but then also back to your sales team, right? It's important to know what's happening on both sides of that because it's going to impact the partnership at large. If the CSM is the main point of contact for the existing partnership, they should be the ones facilitating that communication and even orchestrating any necessary internal meetings as they be.
We got the sales in the mix, and we have the CSM in a supporting role to continuously provide updates to the customer. Anybody else you would recommend to be involved at this point?
We involve everybody. When you have that strategic plan and alignment at the onset of this, right? So you've just found out, and we talked about that research, then also bringing in sales and bringing in those right people, right? This is where you need to figure out what is the team that's going to be required. Now, you're probably going to need to pull in product at some point, right? Maybe their product needs are different because they're a larger company, right? Maybe it's a different use case all entirely. If it is a competitive situation, you might want to pull in products so they can speak about your platform's differentiators or even talk about the roadmap. So I think there's a lot of use cases where product can fit very nicely in to help facilitate that conversation. Marketing might be there to help facilitate materials and use cases and customer stories. I think a lot about that, as well as maybe facilitating reference calls if, again, this new entity wanted to speak with anyone outside of the acquiring company to get another perspective. So maybe there's things like that that your marketing team is going to help with. But then also your executive leadership team. So you talked about that nicely, whether it's leveraging them directly or through board of directors or other senior level relationships, they've also got to be involved. They've got to have a little skin in the game to make sure this goes well.
I have seen many times where the parent company actually does retain the software, and not only that, embraces that one as a new tool for the entire organization. I think that there's some questions that companies actually take a pause to think through before they make a decision whether to cancel the contract of the child to the new acquired company or not. What, in your experience, were some of the questions that customers that were going through that process of deciding whether to keep the software or even move it upward so that the parent company also uses it? What kind of things do they usually ask? Is there something that we can do to help them through thinking about the process?
Yeah, so a lot of our customers have really inquired about what other extended use cases, what other parts of the product that they're not using today. It ends up being a lot about the technology and what it could do at different levels and scale. It's going to go a lot down that product rabbit hole where maybe they're trying to learn, understand what they don't know, right? Like you don't know what you don't know. So they're going to want to understand that so they feel comfortable positioning and talking about it. I've also had them ask about different pricing and pricing models. Usually I'll get inquiries about like ELA licenses, right? What can we do to facilitate better pricing, especially if that parent company has other companies that they have brought into their fold, right? This doesn't have to be the opportunity only to get up. It could be to get up and out. We get a lot of questions also that lean into what will the future hold, right? Like, so there's a lot of forward thinking because obviously, again, at that level, they're not thinking about the use cases that we have today. We're thinking about the future of that. And then I would say the last thing that we get a lot of questions around is really about like, integrations. You've got to be able to integrate. So you talked about this earlier, right? Like how do you get all the data and systems to talk to each other? We get a lot of questions around that, right? Like what does data flow look like? Data accuracy, the integrity of it, currency. It's a lot of questions around what can we do with the information we have and what's the ease of flow for data democratization. That's a big, I think, kind of on the fourth bucket of the line of questioning we start to get when our customers are going through this.
But I would recommend to everybody that's listening to this video, make a similar list of questions and make sure you either have the answers to these questions so that you know what to answer, or even create a workshop or a meeting with a customer that after a merger and acquisition to kind of say, do they know what the questions should be? Do they have the answers to those? And be able to provide some collateral around it. Be prepared ahead of time. Maybe finally, we talk about M&As as if our customers, the first top of mind when they go through it is to call us and let us know. Assuming that they're not going to do that, is there any way that's like a quick and dirty tip on how to find out about a merger fairly early?
There's a website called Seeking Alpha that has a lot of information on financials and companies. Mergers and acquisitions, a big part of that. So you can find out all the information there. I'm a big fan of things just like Google Alerts. Just sort of Google Alerts for your company's names and you'll tend to see things as they come through. follow the company pages on LinkedIn. Usually in M&A are things that people are proud to broadcast. There's probably going to be some PR around it. So you can definitely hear about it there if your customer doesn't come to you first. I'm a big fan of Bloomberg. My husband works in finance, so I get Bloomberg chats all the time. And so I get a little sneak peek into some of what's happening there in the financial world. But that's always been a really helpful resource. So, just stay abreast of these media channels. And like I said, simple things like Google Alerts and LinkedIn, probably your best bet if you're not looking to invest in any tools or kind of media outlets.
Hopefully, everybody, you learned something new from this video and you're going to take some action items home to improve your processes and policies. And if you have anybody you'd like to recommend for our channel, feel free to comment below. Kristi, thank you so much. And guys, I'll see you at the next video.